The following program is a production of Pioneer Public Television.
Hello and welcome to Compass, a production of Pioneer Public Television. I'm Les Heen, your host for Compass. This is a weekly discussion of public policy and important issues facing our viewing area. This week, we will look at deep winter greenhouses. These greenhouses are part of a larger trend of winter farming techniques that are changing the industry. First, we'll have the story of how one deep winter greenhouse in Milan, Minnesota got its start, and it found a place in the community as a source of fresh winter produce. For more on the subject, here's a report from Laura K. Prosser.
For a lot of people with the love of gardening, it's a seasonal hobby. But Carol Ford wasn't satisfied with fresh-cut flowers or fresh-cut vegetables for only 3 measly months out of the year. So she went on a mission and found a solution that allowed her to garden year-round. We're here in Milan to see how.
The problem was, in the fall, it was all over with, and it was hard to go back to the grocery store after getting all that fresh, wonderful produce. So I was starting to have this conversation with my then boyfriend about what could we do about this? Because I had read when I was learning to be a master gardener about the kind of winter production that they do in Canada. But those are, like great big hoop houses and lots of fossil fuel and subsidized, and that just didn't sound to me like really a solution.
Instead, what became the solution was the idea of building a deep winter greenhouse, much like the passive solar designs from the 1970s. But as a community-supported agriculture, or CSA endeavor.
We started out as a CSA because that really kind of helps reduce your risk. You get, payment from all of those share members at the very beginning, and so you've got your capital up front, that first year. And what we realized when we were doing that is that we didn't just want to build one greenhouse because that doesn't solve anything. So to make one that could, we needed to make sure that it was easily replicable, that it wasn't too complicated, for people to be able to do, and that you could just use basic carpentry skills to build it, and materials that you could source locally.
But what one person wants out of fresh produce, another shareholder might want something completely different. So Carol had to balance what she wanted to grow with what everybody else wanted out of the greenhouse.
I did realize that most everybody was in it for the greens because they're so incredibly good in here. I mean, it's a premium product, and you'll see with these planters of greens that we grow, they're such a high quality. I call them my chia pets, because they grow so lushly in these planters, and because of that, you don't get soil splash up on them. So they're super clean, and they're so fresh, and they taste so good. And I grow, over 3 dozen varieties, and they're all different kinds of salad greens. So you get different colors, different leaf shapes and textures and flavors, and it changes through the winter because I found that the key to good production in here is understanding that there are 3 components to winter. It's during that period of time when the days are getting shorter, and then in the middle when the days are the shortest they're going to be, and then when they start getting longer again. And the plants, different plants respond to that differently. So you want to know which ones grow best in each of those times. So there's this constant change in what's in the mix of greens that people get every week. And they just love them. I actually had one share member who told me that when she comes home with her box, the first thing she does is she takes that bag of salad greens out, and she'll go and sit and watch her favorite show, and she would eat the greens out of the bag like she used to with chips. And I just thought, wow, that's the food revolution,
Not only was it to change how people looked at fresh food, but Carol Ford's passive solar design was also meant to change how people looked at greenhouses.
One of the basic principles in passive solar design is that you're going to have a thermal mass that you will use to store all of that heat energy that you get during the day when the sun's shining. And in this greenhouse, we use between $100 and $200 of propane a year. Not a month, not a week, for the whole season. So that's how effective this passive solar design is. It's amazing what a little sun will do. Especially when you know how to grab it and use it. And that's what this system does. But we did want to make sure that we weren't adding a lot of complexity to it. So I wanted to find out what could grow in here with no added lights, no added heat, just for what the passive solar greenhouse can do. The idea is that out where we live, we're considered to be a food desert. The USDA's definition of that is if you have to drive more than 15 miles to get to a decent-sized grocery store that has a good produce section, you're in a food desert. By having this thing as simple as possible makes it more accessible for other people to do. It's at a manageable size. It can be built anywhere. And it can be run by anybody. And this thing has applications not only in rural areas but also in urban areas because they've got food deserts too. And you know, you can build one of these off a school, so you can actually have kids in there, you know, do a curriculum in there when kids are actually in school. You can have one off of a local foods restaurant. You can have one as part of a community garden or off of a community center. You can have it off of a nursing home. That's the beautiful thing about just going with some really basic principles. People can riff on that endlessly for whatever it is they want to do. There's so many ways that these things can bring fresh food to people right where they are.
With us now to discuss what's new in the winter agriculture business, we have two guests. Greg Swayzer is from the Regional Sustainable Development Partnership, and he's based in St. Paul. Also with us is Sue Wicca, and she's a Deep Roost Farmer Development Program Specialist from Ashby, which is in west central Minnesota. So Greg, Sue, thanks for coming into Compass.
Thanks for having me.
You know, a few years ago, if somebody said deep winter greenhouses in Minnesota, I expect people would have said, a what? Mm-hmm. So what's going on with deep winter greenhouses? This just seems to be a fascinating new part of agriculture.
It's really got the attention of a lot of folks, Les. I would say that Minnesotans are really concerned about the fragility of having a food source that has to come from so far away, such as California and Mexico. And I think that there's a innate frugality about people in this part of the country and just saying, gee, can we do this here? And so I think people are very excited about the really the low cost and very human scale of these deep winter greenhouses. And they're really thinking about, is that something I could add to my operation and provide food for my community? So it's a good thing.
And when you talk about human scale, I mean, in your operation, for example, you're talking about the fact that you can go into the greenhouse every day, you see the changes, you see exactly what's going on. It's a scale that people can really understand. Right?
Exactly. The model, and my husband and I were very much influenced by Chuck and Carol's greenhouse in Milan, and we built ours 16 by 24 off of our livestock barn because it fit and made sense for our operation to have it next to our barn where we had all the utilities, the electrical, the water was all there. And in addition to providing winter greens for our winter customers, we also grow barley fodder for our livestock, so we're able to bring a pastoral element into our livestock operation over the winter months. So we have a double win in our situation in a tiny 16 by 24 structure.
So Greg, with your work with the Sustainable Regional Development Partnerships, you see people all over the state, you travel everywhere. Mm-hmm. Give us a perspective on what do you think is going on in the upper Midwest right now with deep winter greenhouses.
Well, I think that the interest and excitement is really, really strong and growing. There currently aren't an awful lot of these. There's maybe 20 or so, but we've been hosting workshops over the last 2 or 3 years and bringing people from all edges of the state into our various conference workshops, and the numbers of people attending these are growing and growing and growing. So what we're hoping to do in the future is once we have more of these built in partnerships with the university, people who are more connected with the university and with us, we want to actually hold a lot more workshops inside the greenhouses so people can come out and see how they work, kick the tires, kind of look around a little bit and see really kind of how magical they really can be. Because, in winter in Minnesota, it's freezing cold, it's windy, there's snow and ice everywhere, but you go inside one of these greenhouses and it's sort of like this, magical wonderland of growing things and warmth, and it's pretty exciting. Yeah.
What about the investment in this? I mean, obviously there's a lot of work you have to go through up front, so is there sort of an average idea that you give folks to say, okay, if you want to get into this, this is what you need to know?
Well, we have done some research and studying about 7 or 8 of existing greenhouses and looked at the different costs that that people put into starting these things up. The range was pretty dramatic. So at the lower end was about $5,000, I think, if I remember right. The upper end was more like $75,000. So somewhere the median was a little bit around $20,000. It really depends on your own ability to swing a hammer, whether you have some mechanical equipment over you on how much of your own personal labor you can put into it, whether you have, deals with your hardware store, whoever, I don't know. But I would say for a small scale, maybe for Sue's scale, around that size, an estimation would probably be somewhere about $20,000 to $25,000, I think.
Exactly, particularly if you need to hire the labor for it. Mm-hmm. So our structure, because we provided our own management team, construction management, and had our own labor, it was, again, about $5,000. So they are doable if you want to put sweat equity into them. So.
Well, I saw an article, a newspaper article recently of some of the things you were doing, and sure. You were, for example, reusing rain gutters for planters, right? So I mean, that's the other way people can reduce or reuse things in greenhouses, right?
And I think what's really exciting about this, Les, is that with the Deep Roots Farmer Development Program, Tom and I have been holding deep winter growing classes for the last 3 years, and we probably to this point have educated about 75 or 80 people. And I think what people are seeing based on those classes and the series of deep winter tours that the RSDP sponsored this last winter along with the Sustainable Farming Association, people are seeing the unique ways that the 20 or so farmers who have them have really tweaked them to fit their own farming systems. And there's a lot of things, particularly, again, that frugality that I really think is quite evident in the communities out there that, they see, you reuse that, and, could we use windows instead of the double pane polycarb? And people are really, there's a general recipe guide, but no one really has to follow that exact recipe. So I think we're going to see, as what I call it, Deep Winter Greenhouse 2.0 is right around the corner, and we're going to see the whole next arena of these DWGs, and it'll be exciting. So. Well,
especially you get people's creativity involved, I expect. They'll say, I don't have that, but I have this item over here, and so I could reuse this instead. That's the next stage?
Exactly. And I think there's a lot of science, and the land grant has really kind of sunk their teeth into this movement, so to speak, and done a lot of research. Mm-hmm. But then with any type of farming, ask any farmer out there, there's a lot of art that's involved with that. And the one thing that I really love about the DWGs is because of the scale and that they can be small and fairly affordable, they can be a really nice thing, particularly like for beginning farmers or small scale folks to add a deep winter greenhouse and add a fourth season income stream. It's another way to feed yourself, that there are some people who have very unique dietary needs. They're really concerned about nutrient-dense food, locality and such. There's just so many reasons to build one. My goal is that there be at least 2 in every township here in the next 10 years. We need to feed our neighbors this good food.
So 2 in every township, and a typical township is 36 square miles, so 1 every 18 square miles. So that sounds local.
There's also a range of populations in townships and counties, so we might need more than 2 in some places.
Exactly.
But I would say also, we're talking about 2.0 and connecting with the land grant. So we've been working with the Center for Sustainable Building Research. They've looked at a lot of the existing deep winter greenhouses, done performance analyses and studies, and they've developed a prototype. So it may not be perfect. I think they'd say it's 1.0, but I think it builds on the existing greenhouses that are out there and strengthens the system, the design. For example, one of the changes that I think they're going to be suggesting in this prototype is that rather than have the system of underground ductwork, that the drainage tiling that fuels into the air circulation system, they figure if you stick one pipe in one side and one pipe in the other, you put a hard pan down on top, that you can eliminate all of the internal ductwork and still get maybe even a better performance out of them. So they're doing a lot of little things, a lot of maybe some big things to figure out how to make the system work better and yet make it cheaper still. And even they're also looking into, for example, the different types of materials that you can build, and then looking at the life cycle of those materials and the green cycle of those materials, figure out what's the best green way to build these things as well, because there's a large variety of different ways these can be built. So that's maybe 2.0, maybe 3.0. Then is scaling it up and really figuring out a way to both do that small scale thing, but also to do it on a scale where someone can really go and do some big production, or maybe figure out how to add lights and extra heat in a way that doesn't increase the carbon footprint, but enables people to grow things like strawberries and cucumbers and tomatoes and bedding plants. The sky is the limit.
So if we jump back from 3.0 or 2.0, wherever we are now, back to 1.0. 1.2, okay. Technology. Obviously something has, caused this dramatic increase. Is it technology? Is it local foods? Is it all of the above? Why is there suddenly this big interest right now?
I think that the local food movement has grown, and it's been very strong in Minnesota, not just in the Twin Cities, but throughout Minnesota. It's been very strong. And so there's excitement about the idea that we can grow food in the wintertime. We can, you see more winter CSAs, you see more storage crops, you see more squash and onions and that kind of thing come out throughout the winter. And this is a way to really have the whole package. We can always do meats and cheeses in the winter, but now we can do greens and veggies and onions and squash, all these things. It's just, it makes people feel really good to know that you can get all of these things in the winter fresh in Minnesota. So that's one of the reasons. I think there's a lot of others.
I think what's exciting and what you learned from looking at Carol Ford's greenhouse is that the variety of greens, that if we don't add additional light and we don't add additional heat, there's a fabulous array of greens that can be grown in the low light of winter. Without doing lots of tweaks, this 1.0 version has been very productive and very easy to work with. But the array of the Asian greens, the different types of lettuces and all the brassicas that can be grown, I've yet to walk into the fanciest grocery store and see those types of greens on those shelves. So again, why not? It really can open people's horizons to some of the good food that's out there that you really can't get anywhere else, and people have maybe not even tried in their own summer gardens.
So what would be some examples? Because we hear about things like kale that's extremely tough, and we hear about things that spinach can overwinter, and those are some things that might come to mind. But when you talk about these foods, what are some of the other ones that would commonly be grown in a deep winter greenhouse?
Right. What's fabulous about deep winter production is that you get very in tune to the winter season. So, who would know that there's seasonality within winter, right? So we have the period, when we start getting sleepy in the fall, the period of diminishment when our nights start getting longer, and there are certain plants that can handle that. People plant fall crops of kale and cabbages out in their outdoor gardens. In the deep winter greenhouse, I typically start production the 1st of November, and I'm planting lots of arugula, lots of the Asian greens like Mizuna, which is a very mild mustard, is a fabulous producer during that time. Kale is a good one for me during diminishment. And then solstice, where we have very, very little daytime and really long nights. That's kind of a very static period. And what has really worked for me, not only am I growing different types of greens, but I grow them to different stages. So people might be comfortable or know about microgreens from that section of the grocery store. Well, I grow microgreens, I do shoots, I do baby greens, and then we also do full-size greens so that we can have, arugula at many different stages or the brassicas at many different stages. So that is the minis, the micros and the shoots are very high producers for me during the solstice period. Once expansion starts, once January hits and we get to about the second week, wow, then the plants really start waking up, and that's when you can start planting a lot more of the lettuces, that might be like when fruiting crops such as the strawberries, if you wanted to start them in end of January, would come on, and you could have Easter baskets of strawberries, so to speak. Then you start adding some of those plants into the mix. So it's a wide and wild variety of things, even through the seasons of winter. So I've really appreciated being a deep winter farmer, because winter was winter to me, and there's, again, Mother Nature offers us a lot of nuance. So, and it's fun to play with what she offers. The last couple of winters have been quite cloudy. So again, there's a challenge of how do we deal with these low light days? So,
well, and speaking of that low light, these are also some important regional differences. If you look at, say, the Dakotas or western Minnesota, as compared to as we move east, farther toward the Great Lakes, for example, you have more cloudy days, you have more gray days. So aren't there some regional differences that can affect what we do in greenhouses?
It's possible. I think that there are probably larger differences with other specialty crop producing areas in the Midwest, like in Michigan or New York, or places, or even Ohio, where maybe they're growing more nut crops and things. I think that really Minnesota and the Dakotas potentially have a great ability to specialize in something like this. I mean, we're talking, way down the line when if these things become institutionalized, because really we usually do have very sunny winters, and there might be some variation in Minnesota, but you think about this suite of crops that grows in very low light, low heat environments. If we have a technology like this that's relatively low cost and easy to introduce across the landscape, we have the ability to really have a specialty crop niche product that that could really be good for our economy. You think of there's cranberries in Wisconsin, blueberries in Michigan, cherries in Washington. There's all these things. We don't really have a good specialty crop product in Minnesota. There are a few good ones, but nothing that's really big. But
well, and it strikes me also this is also scalable, isn't it? In a sense.
We're like we said, we're at 1.0 or 2.0 with this technology. I think that this technology will be very scalable, but I don't think we still need to finish the initial investigation in this. I think I'm pretty sure the farmers are ingenious. They're engineers, they're tinkerers, and we work with farmers doing things beyond this all the time. So I'm sure it can be scaled, and I'm sure it will be scaled. But
I think that anyone who would come into this structure, again, ours is 16 by 24, and we do a vertical stacking. So where we are growing things at the ground level and then several layers up in the air. And I measured, so we're growing in those reused rain gutters, which are 4 inches wide and 40 inches long. I measured all of the direct growing space, so where I would put a seed and where I would have a plant growing. I have about 144 square feet of green area in there, which really is not that big. If you think about it in terms of a raised bed that you might have in your yard, it might be, between, about 11 by 11 or 12 by 12. And we are very easily feeding 10 families all winter long. We have a CSA model where every week they get a 6-quart box of fresh greens. And as we enter the expansion period, starting mid-January on, they're probably getting their 6-quart box of mixed greens, plus heads of butterhead lettuces or big bouquets of kale leaves, of full-grown kale. It really is amazing, even these very small structures, how many people that we are feeding. And I think in this day and age of, everyone's very concerned about food safety. I mean, we see recalls going on in restaurants, and we know that when we look at the statistics that one of the most, dangerous crops out there are greens, right? So when we look at foodborne illnesses, it oftentimes tends to be greens. One of the things about scalability is I think that when you start removing people from your landscape, or people from having a direct relationship and seeing their crops, like you and I were talking about, that I spend every day I'm in there. I don't want it so automated that I never have to walk in there. And I think in terms of the other aspect of food safety is all of these customers knowing their farmer. I really want to do a good job because I know Greg is coming to get a box for his family and his 2 lovely girls, and I want them to eat the best greens that I can grow. So in terms of scalability, I hope that we still keep it very human-centered, because that can be, it's least alienating for the farmer, and I do think it, again, in food safety and for economics, people who spend time in the greenhouse can eke out those nuances in there, and I think your studies have borne out some of that. folks who spend a lot of time in there get the best returns.
So if we've talked about a lot of wonderful foods, and so we've got people watching and thinking, oh, wow, this is really cool, where do I find them? As customers, where do they start to find deep winter greenhouses or growers? Where do they start with that? I'll ask you
right
first.
now, most of the deep winter producers that I'm aware of are selling directly to customers through their CSAs. And so...
CSAs meaning community-supported agriculture.
Exactly,
right.
Yep.
Well, one place I would advise customers to go to is this year between the joint efforts of the Sustainable Farming Association of Minnesota and the Regional Sustainable Development Project, we now have an established network of deep winter producers. And if you are on Facebook, go on and look for Deep Winter Producers and join the community. And what's really been fun about that is there's people, from all around the country who have, somehow been able to rig a high tunnel, which we wouldn't usually think as being productive in deep winter, but then they've been able to do things to it to be able to grow in the winter.
And explain quickly what a high tunnel is.
High tunnel are the half circular plastic covered structures that we've been used to seeing in our landscape here about the last 10 or 12 years. More and more vegetable growers use it to start a month earlier and go a couple months later in the fall. But since we started doing our deep winter classes at our farm, we get requests from people as far away as Mongolia. That's how interested people are, and where Minnesota is really on the forefront. It's from all over the country, and there are people from universities all over the country who are somehow find us. We don't even have a website for our farm, but they find us. Tell us more. How can we do this? So that's exciting.
In the last minute we have, since we've talked about customers, now what about entrepreneurs, people who might want to learn more about how to get into this themselves?
Well, we have a website. The Regional Sustainable Development Partnerships has a website. It's a Deep Winter Greenhouse website. So it's, if you go to rsdp.umn.edu, you'll get to our organization's website. And if you scroll down in there, you'll find our Deep Winter Greenhouse website, where you could just Google search RSDP Deep Winter Greenhouse. It would probably come up to the top. That's where we're storing all of the resources that we have, where people can learn about deep winter greenhouse technology and look at some of the research we've done, learn how it works, and learn how to build these things. So if you go there, you can find hopefully everything you need.
Good advice. And on that note, I think we are out of time. So Greg Swayzer with the Sustainable Regional Development Partnership and Sue Wicka with Deep Roots. Thank you for joining us on Compass.
Thanks for having me. Thank you.
That's it for this week on Compass. Join us next week as we take a look at the farm-to-table movement and how it works in both restaurants and in festivals.